J'ai vu des phases et là je me dis, peu importe ce qui s'est passé, jamais flanché devant la monnaie. Ah mais oui, de toute façon je m'en fiche, y a pas de secret, je le sais, je médite et là je me dis, tout le seul reste. Millions d'euros j'ai dans le viseur, et sans rien faire tu fous la même merde. Millions d'euros j'ai dans le viseur, et sans rien faire tu fous la même merde. C'est fire, fire, fire. J'suis pompé là, j'veux des love, j'veux des love. C'est fire, fire, faut un bail. J'suis pompé là, j'veux des love, j'veux des love. J'me suis vénère, tout d'un coup j'ai tout lâché. Quand j'suis direct, eh ben non, faut pas s'acheter. J'me suis vénère, j'aurais dit la vérité. Faut viser loin, vous êtes pas dans mes projets. Tant plus la nuit, j'pense au lendemain. Sur qui compter, pas sur toi, tu sais. J'connais la route, allez ciao. Trop de vies se rendent par où, tu sais. Pourquoi mentir, je te ferai pas un dessin. Tu connais la suite, si je te ferai pas un dessin. Pourquoi mentir, je te ferai pas un dessin. Tu connais la suite, si je te ferai pas un dessin. Millions d'euros j'ai dans le viseur, et sans rien faire tu fous la même merde. Millions d'euros j'ai dans le viseur, et sans rien faire tu fous la même merde. C'est fire, fire, fire. J'suis pompé là, j'veux des love, j'veux des love. C'est fire, fire, faut un bail. J'suis pompé là, j'veux des love, j'veux des love. J'me suis vénère, tout d'un coup j'ai tout lâché. Quand j'suis direct, eh ben non, faut pas s'acheter. J'me suis vénère, j'aurais dit la vérité. Faut viser loin, vous êtes pas dans mes projets. J'veux des love et des zéros, love, héros. Billet mauve, billet mauve. J'veux des love et des zéros, des love, héros. Billet mauve, billet mauve. Billet mauve. Fire, fire, fire. J'suis pompé là, j'veux des love, j'veux des love. C'est fire, fire, faut un bail. J'suis pompé là, j'veux des love, j'veux des love. J'me suis vénère, tout d'un coup j'ai tout lâché. Quand j'suis direct, eh ben non, faut pas s'acheter. J'me suis vénère, j'aurais dit la vérité. Faut viser loin, vous êtes pas dans mes projets.
So, if you see a question, if you have a question or you see a question here that you really want to answer, vote it up and we will pay attention to what's been voted up so that we get a good so we answer the questions that people really would like to ask. So here's how this is going to work. We have 3 speakers because you've already heard from Richard. Richard, by the way, was hauled back on because you got to ask so many brilliant questions about UCL specific things that we thought he'd better come on to answer because we don't know the answers. Which is a good thing. I like this problem. So the other 3 are all going to speak for 5 minutes each and give you their ideas on what should be done, and then we will have a discussion. Although there's going to be slides in some cases up here, keep the questions coming. So keep playing the slide as all this is going on. Don't forget to listen, this is all really interesting. So, to go first, we have Aliza Ayaz, sorry, I did that thing, I got it wrong straight away, that's terrible. Who is a student at UCL but has been working on these issues for a long time. But a sociopreneur, that was a word I hadn't heard across before. But she's going to give us a personal student point of view. So, if you like it, you can stand to talk if you would like. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming here, everyone. Well, today I'm going to talk about something very important, actually. I'm going to talk about how I, as part of the student body, want the world to change, and what we, as part of the student body, are prepared to do to create that change. About 70% of young people are more fearful about tomorrow than hopeful. That is a sobering statistic. That means we're giving young people more reasons to be scared than to dream. But that doesn't mean we stop dreaming. It means we're dreaming that much louder. We're thinking about the struggle inside, about the plight in place. We're thinking about the things and how, where, and when we can place a stamp in this world to make it a better place. Our time is now. We don't have to slowly but surely degrading our physical and mental health, especially those people who are of color and women. The people who are most affected by climate change are also the ones who are most excluded by climate action discourse, because they don't have power, they don't have any influence. And that brings me to my favorite part of the UCL sustainability strategy. It's about its testament and commitment to sustainability.
It's hard to know unless we have some global accounting system for this. It's hard to know whether your asparagus from Peru is going to have more emissions than your beef from Congo. You've got to be, maybe just try and have local.
But then we come to sort of the global fairness issue. So I have a friend who works for, how do we do this, right? There's all these competing tasks, and we have to deal both with the legacy of what has already happened and what we want to happen and who wants it. This is a hard question, and it's good to raise it.
I think I like to start. I think it brings me to something that I think is quite important in terms of any climate movements or any climate campaigns we have. And that links to diversity and inclusion. It's not in terms of including all ethnicities, all countries, but students from all disciplines. And that's how you realize that you need to use the climate crisis as an inherent way of restructuring society to one that's geared towards liberation, against racism, against neoliberalism. And you need to realize that all the ways that we deal with the climate crisis industry on the health effects, whether it's mental health, summer temperatures, realize most what it's impacting, whether it is the water they get from the wells or whether it is the voices in industry, and translating that into policy. That's when you start pushing out an inclusive climate action. And that being said, it is very tough, and we're only just getting started to be slightly more inclusive for climate action.
And it's been one of the big criticisms of all of the climate strikes for questions.
Have I got any comments? You ask a really, really complicated and difficult question. And of course there's no easy answer.
Organised events have vegan food, just, the odd cow for the tea and everyone's happy. But this point, so vegetarian diets versus food marks, we know that not all the cows we eat in this country are grown here. How do you balance those decisions? Like, Kate, and how far are you prepared to go? Maybe you can start on that.
Yeah, sure. I think it's one question that my friends often bring up, like, what do I need to be vegan to save the world? How do I step up? How do I change? It's massive. And the truth is, first and foremost, that it does make a difference. There was a paper about 3 years ago, which is very recent, and it proves that if a person changes their diet to vegetarianism, that means their carbon emissions are reduced automatically to a half, and if they're vegan, they are reduced by 1/3. So you can see there is a significant difference, and there is scientific evidence of that. The extent to which we're able to make that change happen depends a lot on your surrounding and on your willpower. I think in England, in the UK, in London especially, we're really lucky to have so many food outlets that have vegan, vegetarian options.
And it's suddenly changed.
It's suddenly changed.
I have been the awkward one all my life. And suddenly I'm not the awkward one anymore. Everyone wants my food.
I know. It's become almost a cool trend to go to vegan restaurants. And you can see everywhere you go, you have these vegan vegetarian options. I think about 2 years ago, this was not an option in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in the Middle East, or in the UK. But I'm glad it's happening. I think it's because of the pressure that's being built up. It's because of the scientific evidence that's being translated into action, that's being publicized across social media. And for my generation, actually Generation Z, I think what gets us to actually make that change happen is when we do it together, when we see that there's an example that there's another person who's done that, and it's easy.
Let's maybe let Kate got a lot of things to get through. So Kate, just on this thing about vegetarian diets versus food marks, have you got comments on that?
I agree completely with what you just said. I would just add that not having cows is a win-win because you can have some more plants with bees, some more wildlife and some more natural areas if you're not using that converted land for pasture. So it seems like it's a much more efficient way of feeding lots more people. There'll be over 11 billion people.
I'm going to interrupt a bit to speak, sorry. Yeah. But one of the things that, so every time I talk about vegetarian vegan diets on Twitter, I get a lot of very cross people. And the very cross people are organic beef farmers who say, but we're doing all the things, right? Fine, eat less meat, but when you do eat meat, have proper, have a nice cow that's had a happy life wandering around the fields somewhere. And the thing is, I'm not going to, there's a limit to the productivity that I'm with because that's an identity thing for them. They have an identity that is built around being beef farmers. And they are being the best version of their identity that they can do without fundamentally changing who they are. And so I tend not to get really stuck into those debates because I'm like, look, I'm just over here not eating cows. Anything's better. Like, how do we deal with all of those things?
I don't know, but like we've got so many, the biomass of domestic species on our planet is vastly by orders of magnitude outweighs the number of wild animals we've got left. So if we want sustainable, healthy planet, we need to think about more efficient usage of our landscape, and that is not using it to grow loads of meat that we then eat. It's about using it better and more wisely. And I do have a lot of sympathy, obviously, with people and people's livelihoods, but I think we've got to think about the longer game, about how many people there will be on this planet by 2050. You know, that we haven't got a sustainable food system, and we need to have one pretty sharpish.
I think there's probably a couple of things in this question. The first thing is how do we produce the food that we eat? And the second thing is how do we deliver that food, which is kind of the vegetarian and the veganism. And in terms of looking at both, I don't think it's one versus the other. I think it's looking at the totality. You know, we need to try and address the carbon associated with both. The interesting debate you just had about the organic farmer, you know, I think there's merit in looking at that as being a pathway to the future we need, which is, you know, we are not going to stop people eating meat right now. You know, if you turn around to this audience and said, that's it, that's the last time you've had meat, I think we'd probably see half the audience walk out. What we need to try and create is try and create the pathways for people to make the change they're going to make. My wife, interestingly, she went from vegetarian back to...
The specifics of this at a national level are really important. This is from the Committee on Climate Change and was shown on the BBC. This is roughly in 1990 what made up the average person's emissions and what it is in 2017, where it needs to be in 2050 for an 80% reduction, and where it needs to be in 2050 for and I think this is a really handy, like every single person in the UK should understand this and should be taught this and should be, you know, this should be explained to them, but how do we get from one to the other is the other thing. And what needs to change, and trying to understand that on some fundamental level is really important. Now I think this is from the Committee on Climate Change Net Zero report, which came out earlier this year, and these are the sectors that cause it, and understanding a bottom-up approach from what sectors are causing climate change, what activities cause climate change, I think is just a good way of then understanding what needs to be done. So.
But the good news is we have an answer, and that's in about 3 steps that come with a lot of detail, and I've just simplified them. First and foremost, very basic, to educate yourselves. What is the science behind climate change? Number 2, to advocate. What are the potential solutions to climate change? And number 3, how do we mitigate those consequences? How do we deal with the effects of wildfires in California, of floods in Bangladesh, of heat waves in Pakistan? The truth is that no educational institution, not even one as powerful, as reputable as UCL, can tackle the issue alone. And no educational institution, no matter how small, can afford to sit on the sidelines. We're all in this together. It's a collective fight. The aim ultimately is to send a very powerful signature, a signal across the world that we as Generation Z, that we as students are ready to unleash innovation and investment at a scale like never seen before. Whether it is for promoting veganism or whether it is clean energy. The targets we have set are no doubt bold, but we can't be complacent. By empowering students, we're empowering current and future engineers, investors, bankers, lawyers, the private sector to work together against climate change. So we should aim to work not with just university administrations, but with big corporations and country politicians. As students, I realize that a lot of us are too young to vote. We lack a position of formal power or the money to influence the course of global markets. But what we all do have is a voice and a will to make it heard. The bigger the carbon footprint, the greater the scope for change, and the greater the onus to do so. Thank you.